One.
Thank you. This is Senate Government Operations. It's Friday, February 5th. And just a reminder to people who don't normally, who might not normally be on our committee or who haven't been in there this year. We do not use chat. The chat is only used by Gail to post links that people might reference for documents or sites to go to. We consider chat sidebar conversations, and if we were in the room at the State House, we would not allow that to happen. We would ask people to leave and go outside and have their conversations outside. So we don't allow chat. So with that, I believe today we are taking some testimony on the retirement issues. And there are two things here. And we have S43 before us, which is, and I don't know, Beth, have you had a chance to look at S43?
I don't know if I have the right number. Is this the one about contractual rights?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So I think our discussion is, since both the that bill and the issue about what changes have been proposed by the Treasurer's Office to our current retirement system are kind of intertwined. I think what we'll do is first just hear from Beth about not any of the, because we got all the information last week about the changes that are being suggested, but only around how, if S43 were passed, what kind of impact would that have on the current suggestions? Does that make sense, committee? Is that okay? And I do understand that only affects VSEA. It doesn't, the state system, it doesn't affect NEA, but just what the impact would be on that, just very briefly. And then we'd like to start hearing from NEA and VSEA and whoever else, VTA is here, about the response to the proposed changes. Does that, okay? Is that a good order, committee?
Yes.
Okay. So Beth, if you can just very briefly talk to us about how S43 would impact, and even if it was passed, it may not impact this one because it probably wouldn't take effect until later. But had we passed this last year, what kind of impact would it make on your suggestions?
Okay. So first, I would like to say that the Treasurer's Office is taking no position on the bill itself. And last year, I think we were consistent with that. When that similar bill came up, so we're not taking a position on that. I can't speak to, I'm going to keep this very brief, the legal issues because I'm not a lawyer. I do know that in 2009, when there was a study committee, Senator White, that you were a part of, that we employed lawyers from a group called Ice Miller, who really specialize in pensions. And in fact, Jeff, they've presented at several of the national NEA and various conferences in their over time. But they did a legal review, and we still have a copy of that. The VSEA and the NEA also employed an individual. It happens to be but the Chief Justice there. I'm sorry, I'm having a brain freeze at the moment. Beth Robinson, and so she wrote a memo or brief for both the employee groups that was also presented. We have both. And I would be happy to share those with you. And again, we have not employed a a set of attorneys to take a look at this, and again, I think you're right that this in the implementation date would make some of the issues moot at this point in time. That said, we think that depending on what we end up with, because we do not have a proposal yet. We've submitted options subject to discussion. Since those options have been conveyed, the 4 options, for instance, in the VSEA, we produced 2 more and presented those to the VSEA. And at this point, we're looking to work with you folks to present further options and direct this more toward the legislature. But getting back to this issue, I don't have a position. We have not reviewed it since the 2009 analysis, and I would be happy to send those over to you. And I think it would be beneficial to employ other consultants on this issue as you move forward.
Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Beth, I just wanted to clarify. You said that it would be moot on the issue. Did you mean it wouldn't have an impact on it? Or I didn't really understand what you meant by that.
Well, thank you. I was following Senator White's comment that this would probably not be implemented prior to the discussion on the current proposals. So I was following up on her statement on that, and I'll leave it at that. If that is the case, and I think that the senator is a very wise person, that we would that it would have a different impact. Now, that doesn't mean that there are other impacts that exist now, and we'd certainly have to have those discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess that the question would, and I guess we should ask some attorneys about this, is the impact that it, had we passed it last year, the impact on the suggestions this year. And if we pass it this year, if there are future suggestions, does this give employees a better standing in, I think that's the term you used, Senator Polina. Does this strengthen their position? And I guess we will hear from that from a different person then, if that's okay. Maybe is Damien with us?
No.
Maybe we can ask him for his analysis also.
Becky
Okay.
Wasserman was the Wasserman was the drafter.
Yeah, yeah, we'll ask Becky, and I think Damien does a lot of employee labor law.
Yeah, sure.
But and we might also, I'm sure we'll hear from VSEA about their opinion.
Madam Chair,
About, yes.
we have Becky scheduled for Monday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, because I doubt that we'll get through with this issue today. Or if we did, wouldn't that be lovely? That's a term that Senator Clarkson uses a lot. I hardly ever do. Lovely. All right, so let's just jump right into then responses to the proposals. And I understand there are 2 more proposals, and just start hearing from VSEA and NEA and BTA about where you all are with these proposals and what your suggestions might be. So who wants to go first here?
Well, I think I'm first in the order.
Then I guess you go first, Jeff.
So thank you. Good afternoon. And thank you for allowing me to speak with you today about the Vermont State Teachers Retirement System. My name is Jeff Fannin. I'm the Executive Director of Vermont NEA. And I think some brief table setting might help the committee. Mm-hmm. Members, teachers are working now harder than ever. And I think it's really important for us to understand that they closed schools in the spring. They went remote. They fed kids. They educated their students remotely, and they kept the economy going, frankly. And they're doing that now. I mean, most teachers are back in school in some shape or form, in person. Most show up to school. The kids may be hybrid. They may come Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, something like that, their schedules. But most of the teachers are in school working right now. And some are educating kids remotely because, the families wanted to be remotely educated this year. So they're working a myriad of situations and statuses. And they're working harder than ever. And then working under incredibly trying circumstances. And this pandemic is the real problem I think the state faces today. Just put it out there. The problem is the pandemic. We have not agreed to the proposals that the Treasurer's Office put out there. Let me be clear about that. We have not agreed to anything. These are sudden and pretty dramatic and extreme, I think, in nature. And they're frankly shocking to teachers. We have heard a lot from teachers. They are upset. It's unsettling to them. And we've heard a lot of it. And at a time when the state has a lot of federal money, and the governor's budget, and frankly, includes payment for this year's ADAC, the required payment for this year, a lot of tough questions need to be asked. And one of those that I'm hearing from my members is, why us? Why now? What went wrong? Why are we here? And certainly we think those tough questions need to be asked. We're willing to participate in that, and we have participated in that. But we understand there are long-term issues, but right now it just seems like it cannot happen right now. The federal money is boosting the economy in Vermont. It's a shot in the arm, if you will, pardon the pun. Revenues are up, and the proposals are frankly pretty huge and asking teachers only to do something. And doing now what is proposed is frankly an insult, I think, in some regards, and that's how it's being perceived, to their hard work during this pandemic. And we think it's unnecessary given the federal monies from the feds right now. Thousands of teachers are upset, and we're hearing of it. They're concerned about the virus, the vaccine rollout, and educating their students and keeping their own families safe. And now to have this on top of it is just too much. Making the proposed changes we think will further drive teachers out of the profession. And we need them more than ever. Many schools in Vermont are already having a hard time finding teachers, and this is going to exacerbate that problem. We're hearing from members right now about, should I leave the profession now, sooner rather than later? And make no mistake, making these changes, these proposed changes, will harm teachers now and in the future and drive them away from the profession. But we do have some time. State revenues, as I said, are up. We have a lot of federal revenue into the state right now. And we think we ought to use that time wisely and figure out a better solution to these issues. We need to ask some tough questions, frankly. The actuary, a lot of this is almost exclusively driven by actuaries who have changed their opinion from a mere year ago, it seems like. And all of these, these are just accountants or somebody in Wall Street. I don't know where they are. But I think that we need to ask tough questions of them. Some of the problems they've identified are demographic. You'll hear about that, right? Teachers are leaving the profession earlier than they anticipated, living longer. Frankly, they're women, and actuarially speaking, women do live longer than men. The vast majority of teachers are women. So these are not new things. We need to look at those actuarial assumptions, ask tough questions, and see what happened over the last year, including the rate reduction that went from 7.5% down to 7% in one fell swoop. It's pretty dramatic, and that's caused a significant increase as well in the problem, if you will. So we think that we have some time, given the federal monies. We need to ask tough questions right now. Frankly, we think the proposals are unfair, to be blunt. But we are happy to meet with you and your colleagues in the House and figure this out. But the proposals from the Treasurer's Office are unacceptable right now, and we have grave concerns about them and what they will do to the long-term health of the teaching workforce in the state, and that does not bode well for kids in the state. So we have real concerns, and I'm happy to answer questions too. So thank you.
Does anybody have a question right offhand? Senator Clarkson?
Thanks, Jeff. It's good to have you on your inaugural visit to our committee this year.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. The current split for teachers is 80-20. What is the current contribution rate?
You're talking about healthcare.
No, sorry, that's healthcare. What is the current contribution for teachers to their retirement benefit?
The healthcare arrangement is 80-20. You are correct.
Right. I'm sorry. Right. What's the benefit? What is the contribution rate now for teachers?
In 2007, it was 3.5% essentially. In 2010, it went to 5%. In 2014, for those not yet vested or hired, it went to 6%.
Right, that's right. Okay,
So,
thank you. That was a good
depending on when
reminder. I was around for all of those, and I should, have them with me. The second question I have for you is, in the $1.9 trillion package that the Biden-Harris administration is proposing, is there, I know it has supports for state and local government, is there, and I'm sure there's support for the education world, is there any support in there for that hybrid where the state and the municipal worlds meet in with teachers? Is there any support in there for pension funds or pension challenges, which many states are facing?
Right. I think the answer is to be determined, to be honest with you. I think that certainly the Biden administration, what I've heard from the NEA lobbyists in DC is that they are trying to figure out a way to ensure that there are fewer strings attached to the monies. The monies, as you know better than I do, came from DC with a fair amount of strings attached. And I think the Biden administration is trying to make sure that the states have the resources they need to fight the pandemic, keep their economies going in a way that suits the state's needs and not Washington's needs.
Right. So you don't know of anything specific that would help with the retirement pension challenges so many states are facing?
I've not seen any language that would do that, but I've not seen any language. I've heard a lot of discussion about what specifically, who knows what will come out of the Senate and the House in Washington. But I can ask that, Senator Clarkson, what, if anything, is assigned.
No, just it would given what a challenge this is at the moment for many states. And the last question I had, you said that this is the time to ask the tough question. So I'd like to know, what's your toughest question for Beth?
I want to know that it's necessarily for Beth. I want to know from the actuaries what, I'm not an actuary, so I don't, the answer is I'm not exactly sure, Senator, but I want to know what happened. Why is it that in a short amount of time, we are so dramatic a sea change they're now projecting happened? What assumptions did they have underlying it initially and now? Why is it that when the stock market is booming, as it has been, we're not performing better or understand that a bit better? I know that there's a lot of thinking when, you want to spread the risk when you have a large asset to make sure that you have monies when it's up and when it's down. But I'm a little bit concerned that perhaps maybe we're too conservative. I don't know. We're not taking advantage of it. So it's a lot of those types of questions. And the other thing is, we're talking about GASB 45, that gets thrown around a little bit, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And it's this group of accountants in Washington, I believe. They're unregulated, and they tell states under GASB and under the private sector under FASB, the Federal Accounting Standards Board, what they should be doing. And in this case, what they're saying is the state has to pre-fund all of their pension obligations today. So my wife and I have a mortgage, and it's as if we walked into the bank and we wanted to borrow money for our mortgage, but they said you have to have the money for that up front. Well, if I had the money for it up front, I don't need to go into a bank and ask them for the money. And so, the real concern I have is why are these unelected GASB folks, and I don't even know who they are, making decisions that have enormous impacts on Vermont and every other state in the union. And this is what's happening at the Postal Service, for example. They were asked to pre-fund all of theirs, and that's why you hear that the Postal Service is about to collapse financially. It's not true, simply not true. It's accountants telling them, you've got to put in all your money now for future obligations. Nobody does that. I don't do that at my house. It's just simply accountants telling states how to operate. And I think we ought to be asking those tough questions. Why are we beholden to these folks somewhere else telling us how to do the accounting? And I think there are some groups now in Washington getting a hold of this and starting to ask those tough questions. But nobody knows who, I guess somebody knows who they are, but I don't. And who's GASB? And I want to know why he or she is telling us what to do and pre-fund all this stuff now for something that we thought in 2010, we're on the path to solving this problem in 2038. That's the plan we established in 2010. We're still on track for that. Let's stay the course. And oh, by the way, will we have to make some adjustments along the way? That sounds like that may be the case, but the plan is in place. And so just because the actuaries say we need to make enormous impactful changes, it's not a word, but anyway, enormous changes, we think we ought to ask those tough questions of the actuaries and the accountants who are making these estimates, I guess.
Thanks.
Senator Rahm.
Jeff, just to dig a little deeper there, do you know of other states that are trying to form some kind of compact to have a different way of articulating what a kind of secure retirement fund should look like, if not what the actuarials say? The
short answer, Senator, is no. And welcome, Senator Rahm. Good to see you on this body. The short answer is no. However, we have chatted with some of our colleagues in DC, the NEA, and that's where we're getting. So there's this national public pensions group that's starting to ask these tough questions. And we think that's a worthy endeavor to examine GASB and the accounting rules that they're proposing or forcing down states vis-a-vis their pensions.
So I think that analogy about your mortgage, if you had it up front, you wouldn't need to go to the bank for it. And I hadn't quite thought of it that way before, but so I do wonder why we feel the need to, and I guess this is a question for Beth, why we feel the need to pre-fund it now to get, if we are on track, or if we are moving toward a plan that would get us there by 2038. And I know that we will lose a lot of interest money and that kind of stuff before then if we don't pre-fund. But why are we, who are these people who are telling us this, and how wise is their advice?
So do you want me to respond now, Senator?
Yeah, I guess so. And then, because I think we need to kind of have the discussion here, and I think Jeff has raised some really questions that do need to be answered. And why we are we, it's, anyway, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'll start with one piece. GASB 45 is no longer in effect, Jeff. That was replaced by GASB 67 and GASB 68 a few years ago. And GASB 67 and 68 clearly say that the 67 and 68 are for accounting purposes, and that states funding is a separate issue. So we issue two reports, a funding valuation and an accounting under the standards that GASB had. The idea around GASB was to create some apples to apples in terms of how states measure the unfunded liability and measure their pensions. I would say that it hasn't gone as far as, let me put it this way, they might have gotten rid of apples and oranges, but they still have, Macintosh and Grannies in there, and other types of differences. And they continue to look at it. My concern, and I just will say this, Jeff, because I think that we both have a similar concern about what's happening at the national level. Several months ago, a former Department of Labor Secretary, the name is escaping me at the moment, and an academic wrote an article about, that states are hiding the true, cost of this and so on, and that GASB should not be led by government folks, and the chair of GASB should not be a government person. And we took issue with that. They actually selected a private sector person to run to be chair of GASB. I was president of the National Association of Auditors, Comptrollers, and Treasurers, and frankly, GASB and FASB, the private sector, are overseen by what's called the Financial Accounting Foundation. And I took a lead, frankly, in dealing with the Financial Accounting Foundation. We were able to get some changes going forward on that, and we're very happy to do that. But I do have concerns about the accounting, Jeff, but they are separate from the funding issues, and the funding continues to be the way that we set this up many, many years ago. And we do use professional actuaries because they do the detailed work on assumptions, bring that to us, and then they are approved by the retirement boards. And at various occasions, they've asked questions about that. They've asked about other things to consider. They are. Perhaps the actuaries will go back and take a look at some pieces, but ultimately we use professionals because we do not want to insert gut reactions into this. One of the gut reactions I keep hearing is that our investments are doing really well. There's a boom market right now, and that is the case. We have market cycles, and you see differences at various points in time in the markets. Right now, we are doing very well. Fiscal year to date. And again, this is not an annualized number. We're at 15.3%, excuse me. But if you take a look at our 10 years, it's about 7.24. The 15-year number is 6.21, and this is as of December 31st and net of fees. You're going to see ups and downs. Last year, as you remember, in March, there was a problem, a downturn in the markets. We made 4% on that fiscal year. Other funds made 2 or less than 2. The average in the country was in the 2 range. I do not remember, where it was, but it was under 3. We did better than that. So, looking at this, there are market cycles, and to say that, right now we're in an up investment, that's great. And I'm very happy about that. We have changed over our portfolio over the last 4 years. If you took a look at our portfolio 4 or 5 years ago, we don't have anywhere. We might have one residual piece where we've closed it and it takes a little time, but we do not have the same investment profile that we did 4 or 5 years ago. We've looked to change that. It helped us in the down markets, while we did better, frankly, than others in that period of time. So, I think that when we did the investment rate of return, that's set by the boards, the 3 boards of trustees, plus the VPIC, the Vermont Pension Investment Committee. We brought in professional actuaries. They took a look at something called the Horizon Report, which is a look at expected returns on the short term and the long term by over 30 different investment managers and institutions. And we looked at what our advisor said, the investment advisor, who does this for a living, taking a look at, what the returns are. And we made a decision. The range was between 7 and 7.25. And yes, we went the lower one because what the actuary said, and I don't have the quote right in front of me, is going with 7 gives you more confidence and creates a situation where you have more confidence in not having actuarial losses going forward. And we think that that's very helpful. I'd like to see gains rather than losses because losses put more pressure on the unfunded liability. Getting to the question of, that you're putting the home money in now, it is like a mortgage. The entire mortgage, in your case, the unfunded liability is $1.9 billion. And you're not putting in $1.9 billion today. It is a mortgage. What the governor put in for the ADEC, the actually determined employer contribution, was a $100 million increase. It's someplace north of $300 million in total between the two systems. And then you have a mortgage out to 2038. That is set by statute. The benefits, by the way, are set by the legislature. And we're looking for you for further guidance after this report has been done. And the amortization schedule is done by statute as well as the contributions. That mortgage goes out to 2038. So the 300 plus million between the two systems, the $100 million increase is part of that mortgage. You're not paying the whole thing down this year. You're paying a mortgage. And by the way, that mortgage will increase to $400 million by 2030. And by 2037, 38, when you're paying that down, it'll be $500 million between the two systems based on the current funding plan. So to say that we had a plan in place, I absolutely agree. And we've worked on that. The situation has changed with a $604 million increase in the unfunded liability. And we need to recognize that going to $500 million in 2037, 2038 is not something that I believe can be sustained while you're trying to maintain programs, essential programs, whether they're childcare, whether they're housing and other programs. And that's been, and I recognize that we have to have a system that supports retirees now and in the future. I want to see a defined benefit plan. And I know that was our first recommendation. And I can say without reservation that the VSEA, the VTA, and the NEA totally support a defined benefit plan. And as you mentioned in testimony last week, Senator White, that there's a groundswelling for a defined contribution plan. We do not want to see that because it loses the financial security for retirees, or employees that will become retired, and not just in this generation, but generations to come. And I want to make sure we have retirement security for this generation, the next generation, and the generation after that. And I'd be happy to elaborate on any of that. I think that I've addressed the questions in the comments that have been made by Jeff. Be happy to follow up with any questions.
And I'll go to any questions. I just, I don't, this is not my area of expertise, I have to tell you. My banker can tell you that. But if we did what's called, I think it's called a reset, we seem to do that about every 5 years. If we did that more often, would the impact be more gradual? If we had done that, we did it in 2017, I believe. And then we're doing it now. We did it now. And if we had done that every 2 years instead, would that have made a difference in the rate of return projection?
So I don't believe it would change the rate of return projection because what that is taking a look at the capital, our asset allocation, and putting that into a capital model and then projecting that over a 30-year period. And again, we have market fluctuations in that period. Mm-hmm. So I don't believe it would change that. Whether you changed it earlier, Now, just for the last full valuation was either in 2014 or 15. And that was a full valuation. In 2017, we changed actuaries from Buck to Siegel. And because of that, we did a mini valuation. We took a look at COLA, we took a look at inflation, and we took a look at the investment rate of return and made some changes, and lowered it at that point. Back in 2000 prior to 2009, the investment rate was 8.25. It was then lowered to 7.98 based on something that was completed by Buck. Then we lowered, 7.95. Then it was lowered to 7.5 and now lowered to 7. And this has been a process that occurs with professional actuaries. I would recommend, Senator White, that we go to a 3-year valuation period. I think that's helpful because it kind of trues up the system on a regular basis. It would not change the demographics. It would not change the underlying assumptions, but it would create a more gradual approach to this. And I think that would be helpful. And that's in statute, and we'd love to see that changed, and would recommend that change. It would not change the ultimate result. We'd still be at $1.9 billion. We still would be at $1.04 billion, but we might, it may mean, frankly, that you'd make changes earlier in the process, as you saw this 3 years ago. And the only other thing I would add, I should have mentioned this is not a surprise. In September of 2019, we began to look at a risk assessment and what things could push the system into further decline. And the NEA, the VSEA, the VTA, the legislators were involved in that, the administration, our office, and on November of 2019, a laundry list was completed, and it's some of those things you'd immediately take off the list. I would say that there were some extremes in it on both ends, but a laundry list was completed, and leadership in the House asked these folks to talk about what they would consider within those. We started that process. It did get interrupted by COVID, but it is not a surprise. We have been working on this again, back to September of 2019. We restarted this. We started having conversations after the most recent valuation in October, and we've met on a regular basis since mid-December, either once a week or twice a week with all 3 employee groups. I'm confident that we can work with the legislature. Again, I'm looking now for legislative direction and where we go from here. We've created options. We've talked about a few more options, having conversations. And I want to say again, thank you to Steve, and thank you to Amy, and thank you to Mike for sitting down and working that out. And Jeff, I'm hoping we can do the same and coming up with new options. But ultimately, those options are going to be at the direction of the legislature, and we're hoping to move toward a more direct approach from the General Assembly on this. When we created the housing report, when we created the clean water report, we had recommendations in there. And frankly, we started the process. I'm very happy that we were able to do some clean water initiatives. But if you looked at the proposal and you looked at the final result, they're not the same. It's a process of dialogue and working with you. And our next step is again, to bring you folks into the process. We wrote the report and keep the employee groups and the employees involved in the process. I listened to 1,000 teachers on a town meeting call. I listened to over 300 VSEA employees and answered questions for about 3 hours after that. We've talked with the troopers. We've talked with the leadership committees of all 3 groups. And I heard loud and clear some of the troubling pieces. The rule of 90 was very troubling to a lot of folks. And we're looking at what can we do to offset that. And we want to work with you. And we heard loud and clear what the most troubling pieces are. To say that we can't do anything puts the retirement system at risk. And I want retirement security for every single person in this state, not just our retirees, by the way. I want to see that, through our Green Mountain Secure Retirement Plan for small businesses. And, when people say to me, they have these benefits, what do you say to people that do not have them? I say, raise all boats. But we need to make sure that this boat can stay afloat and make sure that we have a retirement system, as I say, for multiple generations. I look forward to working with all parties on this. We're hearing the message. We're trying to find a solution. And we're looking for engagement with the General Assembly on coming up with that final piece. Again, the actuaries are professionals. They look at this, they're independent, just like an independent auditor. They're not, they have actuarial standards of practice. And the last thing I will say on this, in 17, when we switched from Buck to Siegel, Siegel did a mini replication study, which means that they took the data, they put it into their own model and said, does this make sense? Are we in the same range? And the answer was yes. Many years ago, we did a full replication audit where we had GRS, another actuary firm, come in and take a look at Buck's actuarial numbers. And frankly, they were right on. And I remember the comment from the head person at GRS that if his mom was in the retirement system, he'd be very pleased with it. And for me, the actuaries are doing the right job. They're professionals. That's why we employ them. So we don't do things that are politically motivated, things that are based on professional judgment. We verify that judgment through a number of processes. And frankly, I think that keeps politics out of the process.
So I'm just going to add a comment here, and then we'll go to Steve Howard. And then this conversation is going to continue. So Jeff, this isn't the only time we're continuing this conversation again next week, because it's important that we need to figure it out. One of my concerns and maybe we'll get enough COVID money that we could actually do something, and we can hope that we do that, but we won't know that for a while, and we have to make some decisions, and maybe we don't have to make such dramatic decisions, but we do have to make some. And my fear is that, as Beth pointed out earlier, that there for at least 7 or 8 years, it was 7 or 8 years ago that I was on a committee to look at the retirement system. And there was then interest in moving to a defined benefit system. And there was a lot of pressure put on the Treasurer's Office and the retirement system to move to defined contributions. And I think that is, in my opinion, rearing its ugly head again because of where we find ourselves right now. And I want to make sure that we don't fall into that trap by not doing something and end up with those forces pushing us toward a defined contribution system, because I personally think that that's the wrong direction to go. But there are many people out there who are promoting that. So with that said, Steve, do you want to? I'm sorry, Jeff.
Just one quick thought. With regard to the accounting standards, this is not out of the blue here. The National Conference of Public Employee Retirement Systems has been asking these types of questions for some time now, and I'll send you a report from that group asking these same questions essentially, and they might give us a roadmap to examine this a little bit. So there's movement afoot, if you will, to ask tough questions. We support that. I think that's where we ought to be headed. And I'm also going to say that I've got to head off to House General Affairs Committee for a healthcare bill, statewide teacher and support staff healthcare bill. So, we're down here in pensions, upstairs in healthcare. It's a busy time at Vermont NEA. But I thank you for your time, and I'm not ignoring you. I've been beckoned to go up there too, or over there in that Zoom room. So
I get it. Thank
I'll
you.
stay as long as I can.
Before you go, I just want to say that we have to do something. We have to make some decisions. And in my mind, it's always better though all those conversations can be had here, and we in our 5 little minds will make the decisions. It's always better to ask people to leave the room, go to the cafeteria, and bang it out and come back with some suggestions. And that is almost always the better approach. And so I'm encouraging that the parties do that, and we'll still make the final decision, but as much agreement that can come to in the cafeteria or the virtual cafeteria right now. I'm sorry that we can't go to the cafeteria, because I think it would be much better and much more productive. But anyway, that's just my little spiel here about there are 5 of us here, 5 of us, and we are the ones with our 11 colleagues in the House are the ones that are going to make the decision. So the best decision that we can make will have the most agreement by the parties involved. Senator Clarkson?
Jeff, before you leave, as we sort of look at this, if you'd be kind enough to put the employee contribution in context to the states around us. I know we're the smallest state except for Rhode Island. I think we're even smaller than Rhode Island in terms of numbers. But if you'd be kind enough to share with us what employees contribute, what their contribution is to their benefit plans, sort of New York, New Hampshire, I mean, in and around us.
I certainly will, Senator, but I also add there and here now that the contribution rates are very different in other states. Some states get Social Security, such as Vermont teachers. Other states don't. So we really would be comparing apples to oranges. But I'm happy to share that and note that Massachusetts, for example, they don't receive Social Security. So there are some real differences between the states.
I don't think Maine, they receive Social Security either. Beth?
Yes, there are differences, and you're correct, Senator White, that Maine also is not a Social Security state. The Boston College Center for Retirement Studies keeps a database on everything, from unfunded liabilities to assumptions, interest rate, and contributions. And we look at that on a frequent basis. So I can give you some apples to apples, close to apples to apples. And again, they might be Grannies and Macs, and I don't know any other apples, so I'll leave it at that. But but we can get past the apples and orange, Social Security states and non-Social Security states. So we'd be happy to work on that if that would be helpful to you, Senator Clarkson.
I think it would be helpful for us as we look at this. This is a component of what we're talking about. It would be great to get as close to an apples. I mean, just looking at them online, it's a huge range, and you're right, they're not all equal. They're not all as you and Jeff have pointed out. So that would be helpful so that we're looking at it in as balanced a fashion as possible and with as much information.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jeff before he leaves us this time?
I have a few minutes. I'll stick around, but I
Okay.
do have to leave. Sorry.
Okay, so let's jump to Steve. And Amy, however you want to do this.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me say, on this lovely day, it's great to be with such a lovely committee.
Yeah.
You are always so full of it.
Oh, God. I'd like to just start by saying how much we appreciate the time that the Treasurer has put into meeting with us and talking with us on several options and several ideas. There's several issues to talk with you about, but I want to just begin with VSEA's position on the treasurer's recommendation to the legislature. VSEA opposes the treasurer's recommended cuts, but is willing to work with the legislature to find a fair and equitable solution. So I think that means that the conversations with the treasurer in the cafeteria, and God knows I miss those chocolate chip cookies, will continue, and that we also, and I could use a lot of them this year. If we had them, I'd be eating them like crazy. But we also look forward to the opportunity to bring the results of those conversations back to your committee for further consideration. VSEA wants to start by saying that we strongly support defined benefit pension plans, not just because it's the most cost effective for the taxpayers of the state of Vermont. It keeps people from having to rely on taxpayer funded programs like fuel assistance and food assistance, and of course property tax adjustments, which have a major impact on the property taxes of your constituents. So we want to keep people off those programs by having them retire with dignity and with a secure retirement. And as Jeff said, the majority of our retirees are female, and we want to make sure that they can live in dignity and not have to rely on government funding. It's also a better deal for the taxpayers. 70% of the retirement proceeds are the money in the retirement fund, and there is about $5 billion in the retirement fund, comes from return on investment, not from taxes. So we have to make sure that people understand that. We're taking money from Wall Street, and because 78% of state employees live in Vermont and 75% of teachers, we're spending it at the general store, at the diner, in districts and in businesses all throughout your district, and especially at the Putney Diner, which we are very, very enthusiastically encouraging people to spend their retirement funds at. One of my favorite diners in the state, by the way. So
shameless. It is shameless.
He is shameless. Yeah.
I'm only just beginning, right? So it's also important to note that the average state pension is roughly $20,100. The median is a little over $19,000. So we're not talking about mega bucks for folks who are retiring, living in Vermont, and spending their funds in Vermont. One of the concerns that our members have, and one of the reasons why we are opposed to the treasurer's recommendation, and this is really, this is not, I'm sure the treasurer is concerned about workforce. It's not her job. It's really the job of the legislature and the governor to be concerned about the impacts on the workforce. You've heard me talk about the staffing crisis, and it is a crisis in the Department of Corrections, sometimes with 80 to 100 CO vacancies that we cannot fill. 43 vacancies in the Agency of Transportation. Those roads are not going to get plowed at some point, and your constituents are going to be calling you. Problems we have throughout state government filling vacancies. There's something like, and Mike can comment on this, I think close to 30 vacancies among our state troopers. That is going to have an impact on overtime costs, and also on response time and the services that your constituents have come to rely on. We don't want to make that problem worse. And one of the concerns that our members have is that you're going to see a massive exodus. You're already starting to see a giant uptick in the retirement division with people who are preparing their paperwork to retire. And they want to retire before any of these changes go into effect. They don't want to take any chances whatsoever. These are the sometimes longest serving, most experienced state employees you have. And they are getting ready to go. So one thing that we would suggest is slowing this down. The governor in his budget, by putting $100 million to cover the additional interest payment on the larger mortgage, or the second mortgage, as we've been trying to describe it, has bought us some time. There's no need to rush. We can take our time because this is going to have real impact. The pension system is by far the state's most effective economic development program. And we need to make sure that this program doesn't adversely affect our members, our teachers, and our state troopers. But it also doesn't negatively impact the economy for the state of Vermont. State employees, just like our teachers, are the frontline heroes always. But they are particularly the frontline heroes in the COVID crisis. Right now, as we speak, there are nurses taking care of COVID and positive patients at the vet's home. There are corrections officers working on 16-hour shifts, having not seen their families in months because they're living in motel rooms because they can't bring the disease home to their children. They are taking care of COVID positive offenders. We have folks in the health department swabbing, testing, contact tracing, and doing all of the things that the governor talks about at his press conference. I love the governor's press conferences. I think they're great. I watch them religiously. But the people who are the heroes of state government don't have press conferences. They're out there doing it every single day. And this is their pension we're talking about. So in the midst of a pandemic, and in the midst of trying to recover from that pandemic, now is not the time to make rash and dramatic decisions on their retirement. Take our time. There isn't a rush. We can take a year to make sure that we've resolved this carefully and that we've thought about the workforce implications. I would suggest having Commissioner Baker come in and testify. He's already over his head in staffing problems in the midst of an outbreak of COVID. What's going to happen if everybody runs out the door before July 1st or whenever they might go? And they are the most seasoned folks in the Department of Corrections. I'd also like to just say that we are a strong supporter of Senator Cheryl Hooker's legislation to raise revenue. We're a strong supporter of Cheryl Hooker, but we like her bill to raise revenue from the wealthiest people in the state who make more than $500,000 after they take their adjustments and they spend the Trump tax cuts. We're asking that they give 3% to help pay off the unfunded liability. And as the treasurer will tell you, you take their 3%, about $80 million, and I know thankfully she's running these numbers, and you compound that with investment, and sooner or later you pay off that unfunded liability, and our bond rating gets stronger, and a giant pile of money appears for the state of Vermont to spend and invest as it sees fit. I think the last time I heard it was like $200 to $300 million will appear once we pay off this unfunded liability in 2038. We're asking that after 30 years of not increasing the top income tax rates, God bless Governor Snelling, that they be asked to pay their fair share and that be the central part of this discussion, that we do that first and then talk about reform to the pensions. Because if you can tax state employees, if you can tax a dietary aide feeding a veteran making $14 an hour, you can tax a millionaire. And I just think it is got to stop that we take them off the table. And I would ask this committee to consider that as the central component of this discussion and a question of fairness. The other issue is fairness. We have people who have given their lives to state government. They're on year 29. They were promised 30 years and they would be able to retire. We cannot change the rules for those people. That is just not fair. We've got to have a sense of fairness to people who have dedicated their lives, often at lower pay than they could get in the private sector, to serve your constituents in some of the most difficult jobs that nobody wants to do, but these people show up every day to do. So that is a question I think is vital to this discussion. The rule of 90 is a problem. The treasurer knows this. We're not saying anything she doesn't hear every day from me. The rule of 90 is a problem, and we cannot support the rule of 90 for that reason. The other thing that we really think that taking our time and doing a deeper dive over the next year, maybe till next January, would allow us to do is to look at our investment returns. Why are we not producing enough money to hit our targets? What changes have been implemented? Treasurer has done so many changes. And Tom Galunka, I love that guy. He's a great guy. His wife is even better. She owns Capital Cupcakes. She's one of my dealers. So I work with her every single day. He's a great guy and a smart guy. Let's have him in and talk with him about investments. What states are hitting their targets? How are they doing it? Let's get their retirement folks to help our retirement folks. We have to hit these investment targets, because if we make these changes, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, state employees don't want to be back here again. We have come to the table every single time we've been asked. And every single time we've increased our contribution rates. We've made changes to our healthcare. We've made changes to our plan. This last collective bargaining agreement that President Town knows painfully well, in year one had a lump sum payment. Why? Because the administration said it would have a neutral impact on the retirement fund. State employees have done their share. And so we have got to give them at least the respect of not making rash decisions and taking time. The last thing I want to say, state employees really believe that they had a deal, that they work for a governor who said a deal's a deal, that we live in a state where we believe a deal's a deal. And they felt very strongly that they may actually have a legal deal. This treasurer made reference to it. There is a lot of legal theory, most recently shared by our great Justice Beth Robinson, that this is a contract and that you cannot change the terms of that agreement arbitrarily or unilaterally. Now, the courts have ruled differently on that over time. But still, Vermont has operated without it being in its statute that this is a contract and we're going to treat it that way. And that's the right thing to do. And that's why we proposed the California principle that we were discussing earlier. Now, the California principle would not have any impact on anything that we're discussing this year in the way of pension changes, because the treasurer has not proposed any changes to current retirees. So if you pass the California principle, you put into the law what has been the practice of the state for so long, all that means is that the deal that you made with retirees is not going to be changed. So that, I think, is a really important point. I think I have probably covered all that I intended to cover.
Madam Chair, you're on mute, and I think you were saying that I had a question.
She was probably saying you've said all you need to say.
I was saying, Steve, you've said enough. Senator Rahm has a question.
Well, I wanted to ask something that I don't feel like I understand well enough while Jeff is still here, which is there are two separate amounts of money, obviously, that are needed to make the funds whole. I am signed on to Senator Hooker's bill, so, I hope no one blames me for not knowing the answer to this, but can a source of money that comes from an income tax, would that then need to be an education fund transfer to help with teachers' retirement, or teachers' retirement does live in the general fund?
The teacher retirement is out of the general fund and always has been since the inception of the plan in 1947.
I thought we changed that last year, 2 years ago. It's
Well,
out of the teachers' education fund now.
It is out of the education fund.
Well,
Yeah.
a portion of the normal cost, but
I mean, it's in
what we're
the,
talking about now
Okay.
is out of the general fund.
Yeah.
Like a big lump sum transfer wouldn't need to go to the education fund. It would stay within the general fund if it were to help make both retirement funds whole.
The money that we're talking about is out of the general fund.
Okay.
The education fund pays what is now known as the normal cost, but that just came about 2 years ago. That's for the current It's known as the normal cost. It's a much smaller amount that's going forward. What we're talking about comes out of the general fund, so you wouldn't need to transfer. Senator Hooker's proposal, which I worked with her on and chatted with her about it as well, and we support it very much. We think it's the right way to go. Those at the top can afford to pay a little bit more if you can find $1,600 or whatever the tax ends up being on a teacher. We don't think that's appropriate. So that would be a general fund resource that could be used for the general fund use in the teacher retirement system.
So I'm going to, I did not sign on to that bill, and I don't necessarily support it or not support it. And there is a nexus there with the retirement systems, but there are also suggestions to tax the wealthiest to support full funding of VHCB, of our housing programs, libraries, and others. So, and I am going to run to a different computer. So Anthony, if you could just take over for a while, and I'll go sign in someplace else.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make myself disappear. I meant to unmute myself. I don't know if there are any other questions for Steve at this point. If not, we would go on to Michael Neal, but is there any other questions or comments for Steve? Amy? Oh, Senator Clarkson first. Amy, Senator Clarkson?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Anthony. I guess if I'm clear that the teachers since 2014 have been paying 6% of their compensation for their benefit, for their retirement benefit, remind me what VSEA pays?
So there's two different contribution rates. So for most of our members, it's 6.65%. But for those, we have 100 members in Group C in the law enforcement group, which I think Mike is 8.6%. Mike will tell you because he paid it for so many years. I believe it's 8.6.
It's just below that at the 8.5.
8.5. You got a discount somehow.
Amy, did you have a question or comment?
I just wanted to add to a little bit of what Steve was speaking to, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so Amy Town, president of VSEA, and thank you for this time. I had a whole bunch of bullet points written down that I wanted to touch on. Of course, Steve stole my thunder. That's what happens when he goes first, right?
He covered a lot of ground. Let's put it that way.
Oh my gosh. I was trying to.
He did.
He was trying to calm myself down. Oh. Then he made the comment about the cupcakes. That's all I could think about. And the cookie. Oh my God. But I digress. So thank you again for this opportunity. So VSEA has not only been meeting with Treasurer Pierce, discussing possible solutions to reaching this 225 million target. We've also been doing an enormous amount of outreach to our members, and we deployed 14 member meetings. We've offered a meeting with the treasurer for a membership. Our board of trustees has been doing some work around it. We offered a survey as well. And as recent as Wednesday, our board met and opened the meeting to our members to just review through those survey results. And I'd like to share them with you. So 1,624 members completed the survey. They took the time to complete the survey, which does not seem a lot when you have a membership of 6,000 people, but our general return is much, much less. Not only did they complete the survey, but they took the time to freeform some comments. The biggest statistic that I wanted to share with you is of that 1,624 people, 75% of those folks indicated that changes to the pension system will impact their decision to retire, whether it's retiring early, buying time to retire early, or retiring on time. 75% of those folks are planning on retiring, changing their retirement plan based on this general recommendation of the treasurer. That's important to note. Especially when we are seeing those vacancies in AOT and across state government to begin with. Also noted that this is we're dealing with a global crisis. We have members of our union taking on additional duties, working beyond capacity. They're tired, they're stressed, and they're looking to retire because they're scared that their pension, their safety of their pension that they've been planning throughout their years of employment is going to change. That is incredibly problematic. To lose our well-seasoned senior staff members now in the middle of a global crisis is going to be an issue that is not going to just impact our pension system, but it's going to impact every single Vermonter in some shape or form. So I really hope that somehow we're able to slow this process down, because with great changes to our system means that there will be great impacts to all of us. I hope that we take the time to review through what those impacts are going to look like. I hope we come to some equitable kind of solution. I pray that we get some kind of federal aid coming down the pike that we can snag and apply down those one-time funds. And I'm really looking to you as a legislature to be thoughtful in your approach. And I hope that we can continue this conversation.
I'm sure we will. Senator Rahm?
Well, I think Senator White made a good point about the bill I've signed on to, that we ask for revenue for all kinds of things every year. And so then nothing gets done because everybody's asking for revenue from the same pot of money. When we think about having conversations in the cafeteria, I have certainly encouraged labor folks to rally around this particular cause as one to raise revenue for. And so, I would just say that on record, the more that labor and other organizations are speaking with one voice and saying, teachers and state employees have done their work and deserved this to be their turn, would be really a helpful message for us to hear, because otherwise everyone is going to be asking for revenue.
Amy?
I just want to respond to that. Thank you. I was in the fire service for a number of years, and I liken the situation to arriving on scene with a fire truck, right? If the house is on fire, am I going to pull the hose, get the truck running to water the flowers and start something new? Or am I going to put the water on the house that's raging, right? So the pension is raging. And I understand as a legislature, you're being asked to look to put funds other places, to start new programs or to increase funding to other programs. But if there's a house fire, you put the water on the fire. You don't take the time to water the plants.
I'd say for full disclosure, I signed on to Senator Hooker's bill as well. So
Thank
so
you.
people are clear about that. And I think your comment about starting new programs is important. But one of my concerns is that over time, we ignore a lot of problems in the state of Vermont, whether it's the state colleges or the state pension funds, whether it's healthcare expenses. We don't really bite the bullet and take care of these things. And so they get worse. And we hear the comment often that we ask wealthy people to pay more in taxes. And, we ask them to pay for this, for that, for that. But as Steve mentioned, we actually don't ask them to pay for anything. We have conversations about asking them to pay more, but we ultimately don't ask them to pay more. So this would be an appropriate time to do that, I would think, because I think the pension funds have the ability to impact the rest of our budget. And I think it's really important that we take it on. Any other comments for Amy? Senator Clarkson.
I'd just like to know, it's such a rich opportunity to survey your members. Was there anything else that we should know from that survey? I'd love to, was that the only question? I think I hope you learned more than just that. Even though that was an important thing to learn.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether we could see the results of the survey overall. That was possible.
Yeah. What else did you ask? It would be great to see the results.
That would be great. And I have no problem asking if I could share that with you. I think it would be a great tool for you. So this survey was specific to Treasurer Pierce's recommendation to the legislature. So the first question was, do you support the recommendation or not? And that was very much an overwhelming no. So that was easy. And then we went on to describe each piece of the proposal in length. We defined what the AFC is, along with the question, do you support the AFC change of adding 2 years? Do you support the COLA threshold of 24,000? Do you support the contribution increase of 0.35? And the members overwhelmingly supported a contribution increase. And I think that's really because they understand what they put into their pension, they're going to receive on the other side of things. But they were really against any other change to the pension. The rule of 90 scares the out of people.
Good Jesus.
Yes, thank you. I'm not that quick. But the idea of working longer to receive less is not attractive to people. And it's, the pension is meant to be not just a retention tool, but a recruitment tool. So imagine looking to get into state employment and seeing all this news about the pension system in the press. I probably would go private sector. The survey also had an opportunity for our members to address this in a free form sort of way and throw out ideas or what their concerns were. And people who largely took advantage of that opportunity used that as a way to address board members and say, I'm really opposed to this. This is really going to impact me. Please don't change the COLA. That's going to impact my buying power moving forward. And then other folks recognize that while the COLA threshold of $24,000 really was intended to mean an equitable change to secure a COLA for folks up to $24,000, other people were scared because there's no escalator, and $24,000 might seem like a good number today, but $24,000 cap is not going to be a great number 20 years from now. So I think our members, the survey really showed us as a board that they're invested in learning more about this problem and that they're willing to do the work to help come to a solution. So I will circle back with my board to see if it's okay to share those results with you, and I'll get back to you on that.
Thanks, Amy. I think we'd be interested.
Yeah, and we're going to be surveying them again. So it's going to be an ongoing process. And I just met with 189 members before I jumped on this call to update them on the recommendation of the board. So yeah, they're really invested in this.
And they supported the increased contribution. They didn't reject the whole idea at hand.
That was the lesser of the evils, I think.
Right.
Of the recommendation to the legislature, the one piece of the recommendation that our members seemed to rally around or support was that increase to contribution. Okay. The other pieces were no.
Senator Clarkson?
So I'd just like to ask Jeff. Jeff, I assume you've done a similar survey.
We have not. We have not surveyed our members. We have heard from them loud and clear. They've been quite clear that the treasurer's proposals are unacceptable, and we've been pretty clear that we think there's another way forward, which would be instead of taxing them, tax some wealthier people.
Right. Well, and remind me how many members you have. We have a notion of the SEA, but I forget how many.
A little over 12,000.
Right.
Just under 9,000 are teachers. So we also represent the unlicensed paraeducators, bus drivers, cafeteria workers.
Right.
And those folks are actually, many of those folks are in the municipal retirement system. Two-thirds of the people in the municipal system are actually school-based employees. So we're not talking about the municipal system. It's a different system altogether. Here we're talking about the teacher system, VISTers, and state employees.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Well, Mike O'Neill, you've been pretty patient, pretty quiet. You want to chime in with your thoughts?
Am I invisible here?
I don't see you. We can look for you. Wait a second.
There she is. Jeanette has a question for you.
I see myself, and I've been raising my hand for about 5 minutes.
You know how these iPads are. I didn't see you. You're off on the edge somewhere. Senator White.
I'm on the edge. What do you mean I'm on the edge?
You're on the, I had to flip my iPad across. I had to swipe my iPad a couple times to find
on the edge of glory, as Lady Gaga would say.
Yeah, I'm on the edge, believe me. But I just wanted to say in response to something that Amy said, and I believe that when I made the comment about everybody else wanting to tax the wealthy for other purposes, and it's not necessarily new programs, it's to fund some things that we actually don't fund, like childcare and other things. But I think that there is there can be an argument made that there is a nexus with this issue. So I think that argument can be made. And I just wanted to say about the timing and not making a decision right away. We have, as far as I can figure out, 3 weeks left before crossover. That means that we would have 3 weeks to make some kind of a decision here. And then it would go to the House, and they clearly could change that decision, whatever we made, but they would be starting from someplace. So we really only have 3 weeks if we want to make sure we do something this year. So my question is, if we did not do legislation this year, and in fact continued the conversation until the end of this session, and then immediately in January took it up, because then we could have more information and more input and more agreement, and took it up in January, what impact would that make? Would that have such a dramatic impact on the system that we actually can't wait? That's my question. And I guess the question is for Beth.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that it's a Beth question.
So I would advocate getting to a solution now. I think that the longer we wait, the more problems we have. I'm just going to go back to September 19. At that time, the unfunded liability was $815 million for the state and $1.040 billion for the teachers. And we had the conversation, said we need to do this now. And we had subsequent discussions with the leadership in the House on this. I think that you folks will remember some uncomfortable times around that we need to get this done now. And what happened is we ended up into March. This kept getting pushed off, it get into March, and then COVID took over. So we did not do this in 19, and at that point, the temperature was at 815 million, and a $1.040 billion was not acceptable. That's in the rearview mirror now. We've now got up to $1 billion. Excuse me, I said $1.040 billion. That 1.5 billion back in 2019 when we were looking at this. Now we're at from 815 to $1.040 billion for the state, and 1.933, I believe. I'm not looking at my paper at the moment, but usually I'm pretty close with numbers there. And the conversation we had last year that this is too much is now in the rearview mirror. We now look and say we've got to do, and I'm not suggesting that we do anything to lower back to that past that 815 million to 750 or something like that. But the fact of the matter is we delayed, we didn't make action, it got too late to do it last year. I think that we have to bite the bullet and recognize that we need to make decisions. That's what we're here for. I did this based on this report, based on a direction from the retirement boards, who said that we need to move on this. We need to make, and the retirement boards are made up of employee groups, retirees, active and retiree members, administration folks, and myself. I'm a member of all three boards, and I'm also a member, but not the sole trustee. I want to make that clear about investments. I'm one member out of 7 there, and I think it would be great if you had Tom Galanka, the chair, come in. But that board said we need to take action, and Beth should file a report by January 15th, which we did. And subsequent to that, the motions have been, and I do not have it right in front of me. I could scramble and try to find it, but essentially the motions that were passed by a very large majority in both boards were that they received the report. They recognize that the ADEC, the actuary determined employer contribution, and the unfunded liability may not be sustainable, and that benefits may be needed, benefit changes may be needed. So that's something that was as a result of the reports, a recognition, I believe, that more needs to be done. They also asked me to do another report by February 22nd, which we are doing, which takes a look at the groups and how that impacts the groups, trying to look at some more detail on, how it impacts income, because this is pre-tax and some of the other issues. So we plan to get that report done by the 22nd, and we plan to continue to work with you folks. So I think the time is now, but there's another piece to this that's been misconstrued, and I want to deal with that. Folks are calling and saying that we understand that once you pass this legislation, that it will be implemented as passed. I would never make that kind of recommendation. You need time to give people a chance to look at their retirement options, to have a conversation with our folks, and to work through this. So we're not talking anyway about having the implementation as passed. We need to talk about how that would work, and and maybe pieces would need to be phased in. I can't imagine that you folks, the legislature, the General Assembly, would say as passed. It's impossible from my perspective. And Senator White, I think that you would agree that as passed and implementing them right away would not be a direction that you would want to take. And frankly, I think that the General Assembly does not advocate this. The Treasurer's Office does not advocate this. And I would encourage all three groups, the teachers, the VSEA, and the VTA, to discourage that message that's out there and take active steps to reverse that message, because I think what it's doing is we already have anxiety for folks, and it's causing more anxiety. And I recognize that it's painful, that the anxiety starts with the proposals that we have and the need to take a look at this. But adding, I have to do this now, because it will pass, it may pass, it may be implemented as passed, and I don't have time, adds more anxiety to the process. And I would ask that all three employee groups assist us in getting out that other message, because I can't imagine, Senator, that any conception of a bill would include that. And I'll stop, because I think that I'm hoping that you would say the same thing.
I think that there's a difference between as passed and effective upon passage. And I think that's what you're talking about, is because whatever we pass is what will be implemented. So whatever we pass is going to be implemented. The question is it upon, when is the effective date, and is there rollout? But I think we need to take time. And I guess my question would be, when I know we're way behind, and maybe had we not been hit with COVID, we wouldn't find ourselves so far behind. But when we were dealing with this last year, I don't believe there were specific recommendations. And that's the difference that I see. We were told we had to do something, that it was a crisis, and we had to do something. But there were no specific recommendations for people to respond to, or to try to work together to come to some compromise. And that's the difference I see between what was happening then, when it was a crisis, and what's happening now, because now there are specific recommendations for people to, and I think that being effective upon passage immediately clearly wouldn't happen, but whatever we pass is what will be implemented.
So if I may, Senator, can you indulge me for one more question here, or a couple more comments? I promise to be brief.
Anthony?
Sure.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
sure, but I was going to hand it back to Senator White since he's returned.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if they're relatively brief.
Now, there you go. I know I get in the weeds. So
Yeah.
I guess my message would be that that the communication to folks, and communications and rumors run rampant, and I'm not blaming anybody, but that immediately it's passed, let's say in April, and then on April 1st, you don't have any choice. We change the contributions, rule of 90 takes effect there. We need to get out in front of that as a group and say that that's not what we're going to do. We are going to give people time to react to this and make sure. And I know that that's what you're saying, Senator. I just wanted to make that clear and ask the employee groups to assist us in getting that message out to folks.
I think that there's no question about a gradual implementation, but whatever we pass is what will be implemented.
Absolutely.
So if we pass a rule of 90,
Mhm.
it will be the rule of 90. When that takes effect and when that's
Yeah.
rolled out will be different, but it will be the rule of 90 if that's what we pass.
I think we're saying the
So
same thing. We're saying the same thing, Senator. I'm just saying that the belief that if it passes on March 31st, on April 1st, we implement it is not
No.
something that, we're not gonna entertain. If I could, on two more.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I interrupt? I just want to add one thing to that if I can. And I know Mike is waiting to testify, so I want to.
Yes. Yeah. Let's hear from Mike too. But
Mike's so
go ahead.
patient.
I know. Steve, go ahead. Add one thing.
So the only thing I would like to say is, and the treasurer said some very important things there. I didn't hear any reason why we couldn't wait, especially since the governor has paid the $100 million in his budget. We have a surplus this year that allows us the time. And I think you're exactly right. In the earlier stages this spring, there was no specific proposal. We asked repeatedly someone to give us a proposal, as did the troopers. Repeatedly asked for somebody to say, what are you asking us to do? So now that we have that, I think it would make sense that as long as we're making decisions that are going to affect people for 20 or 30 or 40 years as they age in Vermont, that we give them until at least January to make sure that we don't make any mistakes.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. For the record, I'm Mike O'Neill. I'm the Executive Director of the Troopers Association. I've had the opportunity to listen for a while now, and Steve, Amy, and Jeff, I appreciate everything that you've had to say. We're all on the same page on this issue, I think. It was a long fall of a lot of meetings with Beth in her office, and we appreciate the work they put into this. We've always been very willing to work with Beth, and no matter what position we take here, it's not that we're opposed to Beth. We made a decision we're opposed to the proposal that she's made. Our board put a lot of time and discussion into this. We met with members, got feedback from our membership, and there were a lot of concerns that came out of it. Number one, employees that are vested feel that they have a contract with the retirement system, and that the benefits they have as employees that they're vested in shouldn't change to this extreme. Yeah, some of the proposals that have talked about really diminish the benefits to the point that it really substantially changes what they thought they were going to see when they retire. You know, the elimination of a COLA or a partial COLA is a huge change for employees that they were not anticipating. And it may take effect for people July 1st, retiring as of July 1st. There's no window for planning on how to financially deal with that in your future and how to change your retirement plans to be able to get through that. Our employees understand the problems that are being faced. They want to ensure that our retirement system, and it's ours, all of the members in it, are paying into this system to maintain it for their benefit. They want to ensure that it is something that can be sustained in the future, but there needs to be a much longer discussion about how we get there. Yeah, our employees aren't going to agree right now that all of these cost savings should be put on them. What they're being asked to do is pay more into the retirement system to receive less of a benefit when they retire. And it's not a discussion anybody's open to right now. There's been a lot of points made about why. You know, we're dealing with COVID. My members are still out there working every day, going to work, trying to figure out how to navigate this new world of dealing with people during COVID, but still accomplishing the goals they need to do as employees. It's been a very difficult year for law enforcement in general, and it's making it difficult for us to recruit people. There isn't a lot of interest from young people right now to come into law enforcement. The national feeling toward police officers, as we all know, is very negative. And it's not only making the job harder, but it's making it harder for us to find people, which adds to the problem. You know, if we can't find the best people possible, how are we going to make sure that we continue to build trust with the community? And recruitment is so important to that it's something I can't stress enough. So it's a piece of this we can't ignore. And it's been pointed out by Steve, Amy, and Jeff. But again, I want to make sure you hear that from us, that it is crucial to the state police that we can continue to bring in the best people that we can find. And it's a big challenge right now. We need to figure out how to deal with that. And changing or diminishing retirement benefits isn't the answer right now. And I know there's problems. I know we need to address this. Our members had a similar response. Some of the changes, they just were not open to even discussing. Something like a contribution rate increase, they could discuss, and they were open to that. And Steve, just so that we can meet halfway, the Group C contribution rate is 8.53%. So it's between where Steve and I were. It's a substantial contribution they're making now, and they're open to a discussion about paying more because they value the benefits that they have enough to be willing to pay for them. So it's a little scary that the discussion just was that you have 3 weeks to make this decision. And how we get to a point in 3 weeks that is the best decision possible that we could make combined for the benefit of, it's probably 15,000 members combined in both systems. I don't see how we get there in that shorter time. The governor has fully funded the ADEC. I know it would be putting this off and it may increase the problem a little bit, but is it worth making a decision so fast that we regret it? I know I'm going to have difficulty with our members if these changes are implemented. We are probably going to lose some of the members on the low end as far as years of service. I don't know that people under 5 years will stay if they don't think they're going to get a COLA when they retire. It's already somewhere where they're making decisions just because of what we're facing nationally with law enforcement reforms. A lot of young police officers are deciding, is this a field they want to be in? And it's a good question right now. It's hard to tell them they shouldn't be considering that. So if we're adding to that problem, we may lose more people. And as has been pointed out, people on the top end are making a decision. Do I leave right now before changes are made? If we combine those, we're going to see a staffing problem we can't overcome. And for the state police, I think we're already somewhere in the area of 30 vacancies, maybe a little higher, which is high for us. At full strength, we have 330 members. Losing and having a vacancy of 30 and potentially losing more because of some of the other factors, I don't know how we deal with. So there's a lot here to consider. I think it would be very difficult to do that in 3 weeks and get to a point where there could be agreement from the employees and the legislature and the treasurer's office. I think we need more time to look at these issues, make decisions, and figure out the best way to go forward. And even if the best way to go forward isn't what we want, you need buy-in from the employees, and they're not buying in right now.
Thank you. Senator Rahm.
I don't have a direct comment to Michael, except thank you. That's really, a clear, explicit picture to paint, which I think is helpful for us and what we need to communicate back to others. What I just want to go back maybe to Treasurer Pierce, because what's come up in all the testimony is this GASB this kind of standard. And I guess I'm wondering, is there any partisanship in how this new standard came to be? If there was a group of treasurers around the country who wanted to work to change it, would you agree with that or would you disagree? How financial? I'm just wondering, at some point, are we starting to talk about a certain number of millions of dollars we're trying to find, and would it meet some satisfactory level for you, even if it doesn't meet their standards? And what does that mean for us? Does that make sense?
Well, I'd be happy to answer that, Senator. Thank you. So a couple of things. GASB is separate. The GASB 67, 68, which are the two standards that apply to pensions, are for accounting purposes, not for funding purposes. So our funding decisions are done based on a separate valuation. The purpose of GASB 67 and 68 was essentially to standardize things. Now, I'm going to tell you that I don't like GASB 67 and 68. like it, but I don't see how it changes our funding decisions, because the bottom line is that we want to make sure that we have a system. And I guess what I'd say to folks is the promise that's been made is to have a system, this generation, the next generation after that. And that's what we need to think about. But I'm not a fan of 67 and 68. There is no state that has, every state has implemented it. I will tell you that the state of Texas thought about not doing it and was persuaded by other states in looking at the situation, because without that, by the way, they would have had a financial report that would be qualified, which would cause them some problems. I would like to see changes in it. I think that there's a study committee that will probably be formed, and I object to some of the folks that are trying to push this to a private sector approach in accounting. It's just wrong. We're very different. Government is very different. So I hope that answers your question. If I could, with respect to the revenue, Steve mentioned the $80 million, and I am happy to do that. We started it by saying we should do it 40-40 NEA, but we're also doing an $80 million. That does not have any associated revenue. In other words, we're not supporting any particular bill. But what we're saying is that if you did have 80 million year after year, what would that look like? And when we're asked to do it, we're definitely going to do it, because we try to respond to every request we receive. And I'm all in on putting revenue into this thing. I think our report said that. And the last comment I'll make, and I'll get off the soapbox here on this, is that 5 years from now, we would like to have written in legislation that 5 years or 7 years from this, we can talk about what year, that we would re-look at this. And if we wouldn't change it downward in terms of benefits, but make it worse. At least that's my commitment in 5 years. I can't speak for the General Assembly, but what we would say is if there are actuarial gains, if the system was better because of this, we would take a look and say 50% of it would go toward funding, lowering the unfunded liability, and we would then take an approach that would say that we would go back, look at the COLA, if that's still in there, look at the rule of 90 if that's still in there, and I want look at contributions and say, how can we work with the membership to say, we've got some savings, how do we apply that to remediate some of this? And I think that that's about fairness as well, and trying to work out the mechanics. So we would like to see that in the legislation, and I'm all in on revenue. Where it comes from and supporting a specific bill, we're not the economists, we're not the tax specialists, and I'm going to stay away from that.
Okay.
So thank you.
Can you answer for me this idea of sort of realizing some gains and looking back and sharing it with, when was the last time we've done that? Have we done that before?
I don't believe we ever have.
Okay.
And I think that sharing those gains is very, very important. And I think that if we see gains and we see that trend is something that's helpful, if we have good investment return and our actuaries get involved again and say that, that their assumption still holds, we take those gains and we say, how can we mitigate some of these pieces? And again, I'm not going to be specific because I don't know what the final bill is going to look like, whether it's going to, one of the more recent COLA things that we talked about was instead of a $24,000 platform, that perhaps we talk about it being 75% of the current COLA CPI, and with a floor of 1. That was something that was just put out, and we took a look and we measured it. We don't know where we're going to land, but we're committed to working with the employee groups, working with the legislature. Will have a more direct role as we move forward. And Senator White, I would agree that crossover is where it is, but I remember in 2009 and 10 when we made the other changes, it was dealt with post-crossover, and there are ways that we can do that. So it doesn't have to be done in 3 weeks. It can be done in a longer period of time. And I'm all in trying to find solutions and working with these respective groups. I am excited about the fact that the VSEA said they're willing to work with us. They didn't like the 4 proposals, and I get that. So what's the 5th, 6th, 7th, and what do we do working with you folks to find that? But I appreciate the fact, Steve and Amy, that you're saying to us that you're willing to work with us. And I know I've heard it from the other groups as well. And I appreciate the respect in which people have treated our staff as we've talked about this. Michael, during the swearing in, there were a lot of security there, and I'm grateful for that. I had 3 separate groups of police officers stop me and say, I know you care. This is difficult, but I know you care. I remember saying to one of them, I don't like giving bad news. And he said, we do that quite a bit, in our career. But I appreciated the respect that they had. I appreciate the respect that all of us have for each other. And I hope we find a solution together. Thank you.
I will make a comment on the fact that there are things that can be worked out after crossover, but whatever we pass, we're going to have to defend to 20 to 25 other senators. And so we have to have some confidence that what we pass, if what we pass and for some reason the House says, fine, that's great, we'll just pass that. That's what it is. So we have to, in my opinion, we have to be as confident about what we pass as we can be, because for the most part, there are some things that I'm willing to say, and I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but there are some things that I'm willing to say, that's such a technical issue or that we can leave it to the House to fix once it gets over there. But in this case, I do not believe this falls in that category. So I'm just curious, what is the standard COLA that we figure now? Is it like 1.2%? What is it in what you just negotiated at VSEA? What was the COLA that was there?
Do you mean the COLA in the?
Steve, you just muted yourself again.
Oh, you could hear what I was saying before?
No, you unmuted yourself and then you muted yourself.
Do you mean in the collective bargaining agreements?
Yeah, but what do we
what was the
COLA
COLA?
is?
Okay. So we have several collective bargaining agreements. The main executive agreements in year 1, there was no COLA.
No.
It was
Oh,
14.
no.
What do we assume the COLA is right now? I mean, the CPI, or whatever we call that we base.
Oh,
the COLA
you mean
on.
the cost of living?
Yes, the COLA.
Adjustment?
That's what the COLA is.
Oh, that's a question you want to direct that to Beth.
If
Well,
I
what-
could,
No,
I just need an answer. I don't.
we were talking about your contract.
Wait, no, not in their contract. I want to know
I'm sorry.
what is the
Senator.
COLA is based on
Help you.
something. It's based
Yeah.
on an index.
The
Is
CPI.
that 1.5? Is it 4.2? What
So-
would it be right
Sure.
now today?
The
So,
COLA,
Senator-
the COLA for the retirement fund, there's a floor that the treasurer will fix this if I get it
I
wrong.
know we have a floor, but I want to know what the
actual CPI is.
Yeah, I get a COLA from Social Security every year. I get a cost of living increase. Okay. It is so tiny that I don't even know it's there. It is like 45 cents a month or some ridiculous thing like that. So I'm just figuring that if the COLA is 1.5%, I mean, if that's what it would be right now today, if we looked at the index on a $60,000 salary, that would be $900 increase in a year. So that's
it
what I'm
based-
asking. What is
Is that what it's based on?
So in Vermont, in the pension system, there is the treasurer a few years ago, we worked with her on this. We put in a floor of 1%,
yes,
and it can go as high as 5%.
yes.
And it's been I think since the Carter administration that has actually gone that high. And because inflation has been fairly low. And
That's my question. That I thought it was a very simple question. We put in a floor, yes. If the index falls down to 0.02, we're not going to reduce the pension benefit because there's a floor of 1%. We worked on that a few years ago.
Yes.
My question is, if I have a $60,000 pension, which is highly unlikely, there aren't very many people that will have that. But if I do, what is the COLA? What right now today would, if this is February.
Right. What's the COLA now is what you're asking.
What would be applied to that? What percent?
Okay. Senator, I think that Erica, I'm going to put this in a piece.
Okay.
Erica Wolfing is a retirement director. She knows benefits much better than I do. So Steve was talking about collective bargaining. This is retirement, which is not part of collective bargaining.
Right.
I'm going to ask Erica to just tell you, because we set the new ones in January. And so I can give you the number for December, or I don't know if it's June. I'm going to ask Erica to give you the number that we used to set it. And it may be a little outdated, but it hasn't moved much. So
Okay. Erica?
Could you answer that, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. And I apologize. I've been having some internet issues, so I'm hoping everyone can hear me.
Yep.
For the record, this is Erica Wolfing, Director of Retirement. As the Treasurer just stated, we released our most recent COLA adjustments effective January 1st. It was based on the June 30th, 2020 Northeast Regional CPIU. And at that point, it was 0.8%. So it was less than that minimum that Steve mentioned. And so for our majority group, it was set at 1% this year.
So if there is the base, the cost, the CPI for the Northeast, which is what we base it on, was 0.08. If I had a retirement of $60,000, I would see a $600 because it wouldn't be based on the 0.08. I would see a $600 increase because that's the base.
That's
Is that right?
That's
Okay.
the floor.
Okay. Allison, you have your hand up. I don't know if that's you or not. Oh, it's my hand.
Yeah, I don't have my hand up in
Okay.
a rare moment.
I have this little hand that is moving around the screen. Anyway, that was my question. It's just what does it mean to give up the cost of living increase in terms of real dollars, as opposed to the idea that you're going to get a little bit more each year? That was my question. And that doesn't sway me one way or the other. I just wanted to know what it was.
So, Madam Chair, to give you a more common number, since the average is 20, under your scenario, the increase would be more like $200 for state employees.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's not on it's based on their retirement income, not on their previous salaries.
Right.
Yeah. Good. Right.
Well, that was what my assumption was, that I had a $60,000 retirement
Yeah. People would love that.
pension. Well, there are people who are working in the state system who are making $120,000. Not
in retirement income.
No, but their retirement income is 50% of their.
Right. Got it.
Yeah. So anyway, I just throw that out as something to think about what it really means. And if we've already set the floor. So without that, people actually would have lost this year if we based it on the Northeast CPI. Anyway, that was just.
You're on mute.
Senator Rahm?
Beth wanted to interject, but she.
Oh.
So I want to point out, and I think that Steve and Mike and Jeff, if he was still here, would say this as well, that the COLA right now is very low. but it will change over time. So the actuary scheduled it at, I believe, about 2.3% over the period of the long term. It was 2.5. They lowered it to 2.3. They took a look at a number of studies to do that. But I do want to point out that to be very candid, it does erode the purchasing power over time. I want to be completely objective about the variables in this. And so I wanted to mention that. And I think that that's something we're concerned about, which is why one new proposal or thought was, let's do 75% of the COLA with a floor of 1. And maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. We've got some work to do, but we're still trying to evolve ideas and bring them to you folks and have that discussion. But I did want to point out that we had negative 1 year, and that's when we changed it to the floor of 1. Because we're not happy with the thought of telling folks that you're going to have less money, not more money. But I did want to get that across to you. So thank you.
Yeah, I remember that conversation.
Yeah.
And you're right, it does decrease the income of people over time. And I understand that. I just wanted to get a sense of what we're talking about. And if they based it on 2.3, that's very helpful.
Yep.
Matt, yeah, as I listen to all this, legislators, of course, receive no benefit, pension benefit.
Mm-hmm.
We get no retirement. I think we're the only public servants that don't. I think we need some of these people. Steve needs to negotiate for us.
And Senator, just so you know, and I know President Town is chomping at the bit to tell you this, the VSEA is officially on record supporting retirement and healthcare benefits for state employees.
Which, as we will recall,
for
we get neither.
For legislators.
Yeah, legislators get neither.
And I'm sure, I'm sure Mike doesn't have any objection to it. But.
Madam Chair, maybe you're way ahead of me on this, but I'm just curious if it makes sense to hear from other people for our own benefit as things unfold quickly later in the session, or okay. And are we, for a new member who also was very new when this came up in 2009, 2010, are we going to start working with something on paper, or probably not? We just don't know yet.
Well, my feeling is that, we have this scheduled again for next week.
Okay.
My hope is that by next week, there would be some movement to come to some agreements. If we're going to do anything this year, we have to start having it on paper by the end of next week.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I do realize, Beth, that it can be changed in the House, but I'm not going to report a bill on the floor that I don't believe in. So, yes. And try to convince 25 other people to vote for it. I'm sure Senator Collmore, who reports some of our more complicated bills, would be very happy to report a bill that nobody agrees with. That Senator Collmore, that was not.
Seems pretty agreeable.
He is very agreeable, but I do not think that he would want to report a bill that even the 5 of us didn't feel really comfortable with. So
I think I have a dentist appointment that day.
I'm washing my hair. So I think that we need to feel confident that whatever we pass is something that we can live with. And that there might be some technical changes or implementation dates that could be changed or something like that. But if we define the benefits that in a bill, I think we have to feel comfortable with them. That's why I just, I really think that we should be talking, now that there are specific ideas on the table, which there weren't in the spring when everybody was responding. It was just an acknowledgement that there was a crisis and we had to do something about it, but there was
Right.
nothing to respond to. So now that there's something to respond to, I think that people can start that negotiation and can start that between VTA and VSEA and NEA. And I mean, not between the three of them, but each of them with the retirement system to hopefully come up with some, I mean, I know the rule of 90 is, might seem very seductive, but whoa, that's a huge change. And I think that we need more information on that. So that's my feeling, is that I would rather, as Susanna Davis always says to us, don't do something quickly, do it right. So, Senator Clarkson?
Yeah, I'm just curious. The employee contributions are range from 6% with the teachers up to 8.53% with the troopers. Well, is there a reason that the troopers pay so much more? Is it because they work shorter time? They only work till they're 55? What's the reason for that?
Mike, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I could try to answer that. I think you're correct. It's because there's a difference in the benefit structure. Our retirement is 20 years and age 50. So you're 50 when you retire. The Group F retirement is age 62. And I think there's some other rule of 87 in some cases. So there's a difference in the benefit structure. So you pay more into it as a contribution rate.
Thanks. Yeah, I figured that was the reason, but I just, because it's quite a bit higher. And may I just follow up with that, which is, what percent do you track any do in a longitudinal fashion? Do you know how many former troopers, because they retire so young, that seems so young right now to me. Do you have a notion of what percent of them continue to work in another capacity?
I don't have an idea of a percentage, but I think a majority of them probably go do some other work. I don't know if a lot of them get into full-time work or something that's another career, but most of them do something.
Right.
Yeah, if 50, I'm almost 53. I've been retired for almost 53 years now. I started doing this job that I actually started before retiring as the president the minute I left.
So Allison, to your point about 50 sounding so young, I could practically be the grandmother of most of those that retire.
Yeah. No, I can't quite do that, but yeah.
And an awesome grandmother you would be.
So for next week, Madam Chair, I'd like to figure out who additionally we need to hear from. I'd love to see what other New England states, as much to apples and apples, or just all the states actually, as much apples to apples comparison of benefits and the benefit package. Retirement package. I'd also, you talked about wanting to hear about the impact of the rule of 90, that change. And I know there are other people we should be hearing from that I'm just, and you've also asked for the parties, to work out of the room, as it were, in the cafeteria, in the virtual cafeteria.
Yeah, and Senator Polina?
I'm sorry,
I'll be right
back.
I would like to see some kind of like a menu of what we're talking about, particularly if there's going to be changes. I'd like to be able to see a list of like, this is what we're asking of state employees, this is what we're asking of teachers, and like I call it a menu to really know what's on the table.
We did have the proposals that had been made. They were on the slide presentation. So Beth, maybe if you could send us those, not the whole slide presentation necessarily. I think that's on but those, and then the new proposals that have been put forth since then. Is that what you would like, Senator?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Is
yeah,
the most up-to-date menu.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see one where there's revenue included, even as a placeholder, where it doesn't just say this is how you make it whole again, but like this would be the revenue gap of 40 mil, just throwing out a number, $40 million that we need to find if we're going to sort of meet the 80 million halfway. I don't know if what I said just made sense, but you know, just a revenue gap left in it for one. You know,
you mean 40 a year? Because I think we've already run that. When we talked about the 80, I split it in half, and then I said, well, let's try it with 80 in the VSEA too, since it, but I know Jeff won't agree with that. But we will we are running that now, and we will provide that to you.
Okay.
And in the back of our report is a series of appendices that have a whole bunch of ideas in the impacts. And you know, if you want to take a look at those, you can. Just remember, when you combine the sum of the parts do not equal the whole, because they play off each other.
Right.
But we would be happy to hear from you any ideas that you would like us to cost out too. We're there to help.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to say, Madam Chair, and it is far more painful than I realized to be in the Senate and have so little time to discuss things in committee. If people are open to it, even just hearing from a few people for whom this is their livelihood, this situation that we're in. I mean, I found it really illustrative when someone's emailed me and they said, well, I know now they're saying they'll do this for older people about to retire, but this is how it affects me as a young person. This is how it affects me as a retired person. You know, if maybe some of our representatives here could find some of their members, maybe like 3 to 5 people, I don't know, we could hear from that are affected.
On next week's agenda, Gail has put on VSEA, VTA, and NEA, and they can each invite a couple
Oh,
members.
thank you. Okay, I'm sorry I went through such a long, drawn out question.
Senator Clarkson?
Yeah, we don't get a very good grade on our pensions. I mean, our whole pension system gets a D- on one of the reporting groups that that was for teachers. We get a D-. Do we get a better grade on state employees?
Beth or Erica?
Yes, a D-.
The teachers pension, we get a D-.
Who is this
as a
that
state.
you're looking at?
Did we get an email from her?
No, I was reading their report online to get a sense of things. Do we get a better grade on state employees?
Who's grading it? This is like using the Sunshine Report for transparency and public records in Vermont. They have no idea what they're talking about.
No, this is a big national group.
That doesn't mean anything. The Sunshine Report also is a big national group.
Okay, I'll find it while we chat. I'm just, did you identify other people that we were wanting to hear from?
Yes.
Great. And is there an independent pensions expert in Vermont that we could hear from?
I think that you might want to hear from someone from NASRA, and I know that he's interested. That's Keith Brainerd, who's the executive director. I think that he might be a very good person. And there are others. I would caution, I don't know what report you're looking at.
I'll tell you in a minute.
If is it Pew by any chance?
Yeah, I don't know. I have to go back and find it.
Yeah, don't trust Pew. They believe in defined contributions.
Yeah.
Keith Brainerd?
Well,
yes.
we don't need to know that. Beth can give the information to Gail to contact him.
Yeah. Senator White is exactly right about some of the groups. Pew has received $15 million from a retired Enron executive who is not too fond of DB plans, has been recommending DC and hybrid plans across the country. And I believe very strongly that there's an ideological bent. I did send Senator White a memo because, frankly, I'm just going to say it, the administration has invited Pew to into this conversation. Mm-hmm. And I have no doubt that the employee representatives here would agree that that's not a good place to go. And I think it sours the negotiation process. And frankly, I'll send another copy of that memo to you that I sent to the administration. Pew
Okay.
is not where you want to go. And I agree with you, Senator White, if that's the answer.
So it was from the National Council on Teacher Quality, and it's called Doing the Math on Teacher Pensions.
I'd have to look at the funding. I'm sure. I mean,
that's what came up when I Googled teacher retirement all states, and it's called National Council on Teacher Quality.
I would
doing the math on teacher pensions.
I would caution us to look at anything like that with skepticism, and to know that regardless of how people rank us on anything, we have to make our own decisions. And I don't care if we get an A or an F from people. We need to make the decisions. I mean,
I agree. I'm just trying to get a perspective.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
I don't know how they ranked, what they used, but for example, the Sunshine Report gives us a D for our legislative openness and ethical standards, because we do not have a policy around nepotism for our personal staff. Well, we don't have personal staff, so we don't have a policy, but they give us a D for it. So I would be very cautious about any of these surveys and gradings. So that's my little stump speech for right now, because I hate all of them and I never read them.
But I'd just like to go back to Beth's recommendation that we hear from Keith Brainerd.
Yes, we've got that.
Great.
I just looked up.
Gail will contact.
I'm sorry.
Beth will give Gail the information, and Gail will contact. We don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. I just looked up National Council on Teacher Quality, and they are at least partially funded by the Arnold Ventures, which is the same folks that are doing the Pew and other folks with a strong ideological bent. And I would caution in using that. Back in 2017, Mr. Arnold had spent $60 million from a foundation, as well as lobbying money and other dollars on this effort across the country. So when I look at an organization like that, I would agree with Senator White. There's some skepticism. If I could do a kind of a joke on that, we got a D- once in unclaimed property, and it was a group that really wanted, no taxes and keep the money, don't have audits of companies and so on. And I got an email from a legislator and said, "Can we improve on this?" And I said, "Yes, I'm hoping for an F next year." But so I would look at some of these things with some skepticism as you're looking at it, and I would agree. One of the groups, NCPERS, which is National Conference on Public Employee Retirement System, publishes a code of conduct of public pension service providers that they feel have an ideological bent. I'm not sure I'd agree with all of them, but I would agree with the vast majority of them. So,
as we look, as we're trying to educate ourselves more fully about this subject, there must be some resources that the National Council on State Legislators or Council of State Governments could provide for us. Maybe somebody we could hear from.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that when we've talked to the NCSL at various times, that they like NASRA, the National Association of Retirement Administrators. There's also a number of groups for teachers, a number of groups out there that have information that would be very helpful, and we can certainly put you in touch with those and give you some contact information on that.
Great.
And I wanted us to also be very careful when we start looking at comparing ourselves to other states.
Yep.
Because if we're only comparing one thing, like the COLA or the rule of whatever it is, or the contribution, we're making a mistake because, for example, we know that the troopers could make a lot more money by going to New York. So the contribution that they're making might be lower or higher, but we also need to look at the salaries and the other benefits that go along with it. So I think that we need to be really careful in comparing just one aspect of our retirement system with anybody else's. And Maine, for example, my sister-in-law was a teacher there for 30 years, and she retired and she has her teacher's benefit, and that's it. She gets no Social Security. So we need to be really careful. And that's why it's interesting to get information from other places, but I fear that sometimes we make decisions based on how we stack up with them. So, and the state employees could probably make a lot more money too if they went to Massachusetts. And so, although it would be a little bit hard for people from Burlington to drive to Massachusetts, but not from here. So anyway, so any more thoughts or concerns or anything today? So we'll get a couple different people, and I would just limit it to a couple people each, because if that's 6 people, and I would like to give them some time instead of just giving them 5 minutes to talk and then not be able to ask questions or anything. So I would leave it up to each of you to figure out who might be, and as Keisha said, it might be somebody who is getting near the end of their service and is saying, I might as well just retire right now because then I know what I'm going to get. And maybe somebody who's entering. Then actually it might be interesting also to hear from, I was going to say the academy, but they don't do the recruiting. It's the individual agents, law enforcement agencies that do the recruiting. So that wouldn't be helpful, I guess. But if you think of any other specific people that you think would have something to add that is kind of a different perspective, that would be good. Steve, I saw you unmute yourself.
Well, I was going to say that you really, I feel a little bit badly about that, the document Senator Clarkson was talking about, because when I was in school, a D- was my goal. But I would suggest that, as I said in my testimony, there are several agencies of state government under the auspices of government operations that are suffering from serious recruitment and retention problems. So Commissioner Baker, Secretary Flynn, in AOT, maybe Commissioner Sherling, those folks, they'll be in a difficult position to talk about retirement, but you certainly could ask them about what's the current status of their staffing situation, because I can tell you this is going to have a very negative impact.
Yeah, and we can. If we know that it's going to have a negative impact. I mean,
yeah, we already know. We already kind of know this.
Yeah.
Don't we?
Yeah.
I mean, it will confirm it, but we already have heard. I've heard Jim Baker say that. I mean, he has a recruitment challenge already.
And we know that the state police and all the law enforcement agencies are having a terrible time recruiting for a number of reasons, but this does not help. Senator Polina, did you have?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else they would like to? And the other thing I would like to hear, I guess, is two things. Would waiting till January, which is 10 months, right, approximately, have a huge impact? I know that we have to do something now, but what would be the impact waiting till January to come up with the best package possible that we could come up with for the three groups? And then I also would like to hear, and I don't think this might be a Luke question, because I know that the administration has invited Pew in, but I don't know what input the administration has into this conversation. I mean, this is a piece of legislation that has to be approved by the legislature. So I'm not sure if they're thinking that Pew could come up with some policies and alternatives and statistics that would sway us in one way or the other. And I think they're primarily looking at the defined benefit, defined contribution. I don't think they're looking at, should it be a rule of 90 or a rule of 87 or COLA or half COLA. But so I'll contact Luke and just ask him what that relationship is.
Madam Chair, I'll send the letter around that we sent on Pew. You know, again, I think they're talking about doing what they call a stress test first, but I'm just going to be very candid. That's Pew's entry into the decision-making process, and it continues from there. And it has not been a track record that I think is helpful to this process. I think that it would, frankly, poison the discussion.
Yeah. I think
I can look at Steve and he's shaking his head. Yes, I'm pretty sure Amy is, and I'm Mike. It's just not a direction. And the boards were very clear that when I wrote a letter, I had a kind of a little softer, and they said make it harder because they felt so strongly about it. And I'll send that letter to you.
Thank you.
May I ask a question of Beth?
Mm-hmm.
So Beth, the retirement boards are made up of I assume financial experts and money management experts, but how many retired employees and retired teachers are on each of them? I mean, how many?
So I'm going to try to get to that to give you the right answer on that. But basically, the retirement boards, which are the trustees of the systems, and they look at a variety of issues. They are responsible to work on the actuarial contributions. I mean, actuarial assumptions. They work on disability claims. They work on RFPs that we might have on healthcare or other services. So they're overseeing the plan. The investments are overseen by another group called the Vermont Pension Investment Committee.
Right. I realize that.
Yeah.
But
so the
are there specific numbers of actual retired teachers and actual retired state employees serving on the retirement boards?
Yes, Erica just joined us if you want to try to walk through that, what the board membership is. But I think, frankly, there's a mix of administration, myself, and employee groups, including retirees, on this, as well as the VPIC. So I'll let you, Erica, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So I'll start with the state board. We do have one retiree representative on that board. They're actually appointed to the board by the Vermont Retired State Employees Association, the VRSEA. On the teachers board, we also have one retired rep who is appointed by the Vermont Retired Educators Association. And then on the municipal board, we do not have a retiree rep on that board.
Erica, could you tell them about the active employee representation on the boards as well?
Sure. Would the committee like to hear that?
Yeah, we would. I just, this horrible kind of thought just entered my mind, and I'm going to say it, and I probably will regret it forever. But so on the state board, we have one retiree, and on the teachers, we have one retiree, and on the Muni board, we have no retirees. The Muni board is doing really, really well, and the other two aren't.
This is true.
So in terms of the active membership on the state board, There are 3 representatives that are active employees appointed by the VSEA. On the teachers board, there are 2 active teacher members. Those are actually elected by the members of the system, and we run that election process in the retirement office. And then on the municipal board, there are 2 employee reps, both of whom are elected by the membership of the system. There's 1 employer representative who is appointed by the governor, and 1 employer representative who is elected by the employing management entities of the municipalities. And then, of course, Treasurer Pierce serves on all 3 of these boards.
Thanks, Erica.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments or today?
If I could just follow up on the teacher state board, for instance, you got a retired member. I think Erica said you have 3 active members plus alternates. And then you have three folks from the administration, I believe. You have the Commissioner of Finance, you have the Human Resource Commissioner, and I believe Mr. Wisner is appointed by the governor, if that's correct, Erica?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And then you have the treasurer. So you have more a retiree plus 3, and then 3 active, 3 members of the administration, and the treasurer. So it's a good mix. I didn't have the teachers on my page right now, but it's also a mix. That you have. I'd say pretty fair, equal representation.
Hello, you have reached the number for Bill.
Sorry about that. People think I'm just hanging up on them, and I actually am. Because if nobody answers the phone, it comes here and I just pick it up and put it down.
Senator, if I remember correctly, if our phones rang during your meeting room, we owed you the entire committee dinner at Sarducci's.
You're right.
That's true. That is true.
If we ever get back to Montpelier.
Okay.
Okay. So Mike, Beth, Steve, Amy, Erica, Ashlyn, and then our committee and Gail.
We owe you dinner.
So Madam Chair, you say I should have Vince stop calling you?
No, I owe you dinner. Yeah.
I know. That's why I had him call you.
Yeah, I know.
I like that better.
Yes.
I like that
Yes,
better.
not to have him call me anymore, but I'll turn off the phone, or
You can hang up on Vince all you want. I do it all the time.
I do it all the time. Anybody else have anything right now today? And we have this, I believe, I was a little late this week with doing our schedule, but I believe, Gail, am I right? Do we have this scheduled for twice next week?
We are looking at S43 on Monday, and then we're looking at.
No, we're not meeting on Monday.
Oh,
Tuesday?
sorry, Tuesday. And then on Friday, we're looking at privatization and temporary workers.
Okay, so we're looking at this whole thing again, because S43 and the whole retirement thing on Tuesday at 3.
So, Madam Chair, on S43, I think the answer you still haven't gotten, and I would appreciate, is somebody who's knowledgeable enough to know how, if it had been in place, if it had been enacted, what its impact would be on this, on retirements.
Yeah, we could ask someone. I suspect that what the answer would be that it was a contract and therefore things shouldn't be changed. But there are those 3 things that they look at, and the first is it a contract? The second is, are they substantial changes? And the third is, are they being done for the public in the interest of public good? And I suspect that would
Right.
that would be their answer, that we do have a contract. These are substantial changes, and then is it in the public good would have to be decided by a court. But we will ask. That's my
Madam-
guess.
Yes,
Madam
no,
Chair?
I think you're right.
But I'll ask, and maybe what I'll do is, not sure who would be the right person. Maybe the AG's office.
Yeah, maybe.
'Cause they
Good
would have
idea.
to defend it if we passed it.
Yeah.
So I will get someone from the AG's office.
Madam Chair, I'd like to be heard on the issue of temporary employees, if I may. Thank you.
That will be on Friday.
Okay.
We're going to look at, well, I have you on there anyway, I think, because we're going to
Oh.
look at kind of the whole, it isn't just temporary employees. We're going to kind of look at the whole retirement thing again. We have to keep this conversation going.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Amy, for putting in all this time, which is not your job at all, but thank you. So the rest of you, I assume, are getting paid for it, like Mike and Steve, and we get our huge salaries and stuff. So,
And our benefit and our pension.
Yeah, you get the perks, you get the great office, you get the great staff to go with it, and, incredible benefits. What you folks do, is incredible, because you get none of those things, and you're out there, serving the public. So I just want to say thank you, because it's not because of the benefits and the salary. So thank you.
I once went to a conference sponsored by Annie Casey, and at the end of it, everybody had to get up and say why they were doing this. It was legislators. And people were getting up and saying, because I have a interest in serving the public and I want to do good and stuff like that. And I said, I'm not going to get up and do it. And people kept pushing me, and I said, no. So finally they said, yes, you have to do it. And I got up and I said, let's be real here. The 3 reasons we do this are the power, the glory, and the money. And then I sat down, and those who knew me were in stitches, and those who weren't were going, oh. So anyway, that's why we do it. So committee, I just want to take a couple minutes to talk about next week, what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good weekend. So Tuesday, we are going to look at the executive order for the Agency of Public Safety. My understanding is that the House today opposed it. So we aren't going to be looking at the executive order itself, but I know that there's a lot of, and I don't know if there's a lot on this committee or not, but there has been some interest, and there's a lot of interest from the outside world, in that world, to in the concept. So we will have a draft piece of legislation. We may not have the whole draft piece of legislation by Tuesday, but we will be going forward with a piece of legislation to see what we do, because we don't address the executive order now because they've already opposed it in the House.
So one body has disapproved it.
Yes.
That means that takes it off the table.
Yes. So we will be having a piece of legislation that does a lot of the same things, but can be modified by us and can be changed and can have more detail in it and stuff. So on Tuesday, we'll be hearing from those kind of groups that are affected by it, like the academy and the police and the chief, John Campbell and DMV, and a lot of agencies that will be, and people who will be affected by it, and hear about that. And then on Tuesday afternoon, we're going to be doing retirement again. And then Wednesday, we're going to do elections. We'll be doing candidates, the primaries, general, and mail out. And originally, we had on there campaign finance and public financing. I think those will go into a separate bill. I'm not even sure there needs to be anything done about public financing, but we'll talk about that. And then on Thursday, we're going to continue the conversation about the juveniles in the Public Records Act, and we'll be hearing from the courts, DFR, OPR, DCF, DMV, Marshall Paul, the Defender General, the Juvenile Defender General. And that's what we're doing on Thursday. And on Thursday afternoon, we're doing the preparedness bill. Hopefully we can get that passed. And then Friday, we'll be doing more retirement stuff.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I don't have the preparedness bill on the agenda.
Oh, what do you have for Thursday afternoon?
Thursday afternoon, I just have the continued discussion of public records of juveniles.
Yeah, that'll start, I think 2 hours is enough for that on Thursday, and then 3 o'clock we'll put the preparedness bill.
Okay.
Thanks.
And can you also suggest some other names on our Tuesday agenda for other people you want to see? Because some of the agencies that you had mentioned, I don't think we have included.
Oh, okay. I thought I sent a note, but I will.
I have the following people
Okay.
scheduled on Monday.
No, on Tuesday, you mean?
Tuesday, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Michael Sherling, Amarin Aborjali, William Sheets, William Sorrell, Michael O'Neill, John Campbell, Timothy Page, and Anthony Fakos from the DMV.
Who's Timothy Page?
Chief of Police, St. Johnsbury. He's the president of the Chief of Police Society or agency. Or
oh, okay. Yeah, so that's the the Chiefs Association?
That's correct.
Okay, and then DMV would be Mike Smith.
He cannot make it. They recommended that Anthony Fakos.
Oh, good. Oh, okay. That's right. Fakos is there now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we got them. So the only one that I have on here that you didn't have was the sheriff's, and I would have Sheriff Boniak and Anderson.
Okay.
And did I hear elections on there anywhere? Is elections Thursday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
And I did invite Keith Brainerd to the discussion on Tuesday. I haven't added him to the agenda yet. I'm waiting to hear back.
Okay, great.
Great. Thank you, Gail.
And as much as possible, it would be really great if we could on Wednesday come to some, we've come to some decisions on the elections thing, and we'll put them all into a bill, and there were differences of opinion on a couple of them, but we'll put them into a draft bill, and then we can, so as much as possible, it would be great to kind of finish up that on Wednesday. I'm not going to schedule anything else on Wednesday.
So sort of try and get to a rough cut.
Yeah, and then we could have Amarin do a draft bill that, and I don't know if it's best to have it introduced as a bill and then we get it and work on it, or if it's best for us to try and do a committee bill. What do you think?
I'd do a committee bill, but.
Brian?
Well, does a committee bill imply that I'm going to vote yes on it?
That was my question.
Oh, right. Right. Got
That
it.
would be problematic.
Yeah. So what I might do then is just have her do something, a draft, and then the next Tuesday, which is the 16th, we'll have that draft and we can look at that draft and then we can have it introduced. Does that make sense? So we can get it as close to what we want as possible before it gets introduced. But then she'll have it all ready so that it can just go right into the hopper and then come to us. And then we can, okay? Does that work?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else?
No, I'm had we passed, just to refresh my memory, had we passed the bill suggesting an agency of public safety, and
No,
had it just been sitting on the House board, bulletin board last year? I can't remember if we actually passed it.
We did not pass it, and I think
Because we discussed it so much, I just can't remember if we.
we got too pushed right at the end.
Right.
Madam Chair, this came in the mail,
Oh, yay. Well, you heard.
but I got left out.
Yeah.
And Gail, I do appreciate calendar invites, but sometimes I use Google Calendar. So if you don't feel like doing it, it works. Like if you invite me from Teams, I can still get those. But yeah, I like the calendar invites. I prefer those. Like
I like the calendar invite because it goes straight to our Outlook calendar.
Well, when I say yes, it goes, my Outlook and my Google are synced. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks. That was helpful. Although, yeah.
I know it'll get a little bit confusing. And as I mentioned, when I send out those daily reminders with the Zoom information, you're automatically included on there since it's a group that I send it to, which is Senate Government Operations Committee.
Yeah. No, it's great.
So you'll be getting both.
I think sadly, from my experience of being in the Senate, you can't get too many reminders are never enough.
Can I ask a question here? I'm just re-looking at this. On Tuesday, if we go to the retirement and ask that guy to come on Tuesday, we only have 1 hour because we have chairs meeting at 4. Should we switch him to Friday and put temps on for Tuesday afternoon instead?
Sure.
So we wouldn't be talking about S43 on Tuesday?
Just the temps.
Okay, if the attorneys can make that change, then we can make that change.
They don't even need to be there because there is no bill.
Okay.
That would be VSEA and HR and Pat Gable from the judiciary.
Okay.
And then if we come up with,
But we would still do privatization on Friday?
yeah, we can, no, let's just do all retirement on Friday and just not do privatization at all next week.
At all, okay.
Because I think we need to get this retirement thing settled, whether we're going to do something or not do something this year. We need to make a decision.
And your question of waiting till the January, I mean, I think that's one of the first big questions is the impact on it if we step out of COVID. Because
Right.
by January, we will be done with COVID. On the other hand, that just kicks the can down the road.
Well, it does, but I don't know what it means in terms of, and I'm going to send a note to Jane Kitchell and ask her what it would mean also if we kicked it down the road till January, because by January, that gives a lot more time for the 3 groups to work with the treasurer, with the retirement system, to come to some understanding and agreement. And I really think we need to do that. And I'm concerned that while we knew it was an issue in last year, we didn't have specific recommendations, and that's a problem. So
We would also know more about, we would also know more about, we would also know more about the federal money if we waited
Yeah.
longer.
That's true. Is Isabel ready to go out?
Oh, I have a very funny, did you hear the New Hampshire legislature legislated that you can't have your pets in your Zoom meetings?
Oh,
I'm
they have
sending, I
nothing?
will send this article to all of you. It's unbelievable.
Live free, except like the most important part is having.
Yeah,
your
but
pets
this is a crowd that allows guns in committee.
Well, I don't remember.
I mean, you know, it's a bizarre thing. No dogs in Zoom meetings. And here, I'll send it all to you. Oliver sent it to me this morning. He thought it was so funny.
I think that I think it was Vince the other day who his cat walked across the screen with a really interesting
Right.
shot.
Yeah.
All right, committee, are we all set for today?
You
Thank
bet.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.